In front of hundreds of people, my son announced that he had bought me an apartment in Montmartre and would provide me with a monthly allowance of 10,000 euros. But that night, I still had to eat dry bread in my leaky, dilapidated attic. My name is Alara, and I'm over 70 years old. In my heart, I've always been a painter, but life forced me to set my brushes aside a long time ago. Now, people only see an old woman living in a dilapidated attic in the 18th arrondissement. The roof still leaks whenever it rains in Paris, and I have to place a bucket in the corner of the room to catch the drips. At night, the steady rhythm of the falling water is the soundtrack to my solitude. My hands, which once dreamed of creating masterpieces, are now busy restoring old books and torn paintings for an antique shop. The smell of turpentine and glue has become my permanent scent. It isn't the smell of passion, just the smell of existence. But I never complained because I wasn't living for myself. I had to live for Adrien, my son. He was the only reason I kept going, the only masterpiece I ever created. And he became a star, a successful and elegant real estate businessman who entered a world of luxury I had never dared to touch. He married Isabelle, a woman born into a prestigious family. Every time I saw his success, I told myself that all my sacrifices were worth it. I had given up everything to give him this life. At least, that's what I believed, until I discovered the splendid lie he had built on my sacrifices. I believed the act until the night of a gala at the Rodin Museum, the night I discovered the magnificent lie my son had built from my sacrifice. But the truth is not always easy to swallow. A sweet lie I kept telling myself was, "He's busy. He loves me in a different way." I lived with that blind faith until the night at the Rodin Museum. The invitation arrived a week before. Adrien called, his voice as excited as if he were about to announce a major victory. "Mom, my company is having a charity gala at the Rodin Museum next week. I'll be giving a speech. You absolutely have to come. I want to introduce you to everyone." I hesitated. I had never been to such a place, but his eagerness made it impossible to refuse. A week later, I rummaged through my closet. In the end, all I had was an old, worn black dress that I spent hours mending. I thought it was good enough, but when I walked into the Rodin, I immediately understood the immense distance between us. There were sparkling couture gowns, dazzling diamonds, and champagne glasses that cost as much as my entire month's food budget. And there I was, an old woman in a worn dress, huddled in a corner, trying to hide my feelings of being out of place. Then came the main moment of the evening. Adrien, in a perfect tuxedo, stepped onto the stage. He started talking about success, dreams, and the future. His voice was smooth and confident, like a star born to shine. I watched him, filled with both pride and a lump in my throat. My son was truly in another world, a world I could only watch from the outside. And finally, Adrien smiled, his eyes turning toward me. "I want to give a special thank you to someone. The person who sacrificed her whole life so I could be here today, my mother, Alara." The entire room turned to look at me. I froze. "So she can enjoy her retirement and pursue her passion for art," he continued. "I bought her a small apartment in Montmartre, with a balcony overlooking Sacré-Cœur. And every month, I'll provide her with 10,000 euros, so she no longer has to worry about anything." Applause thundered, and camera flashes went off everywhere. People laughed, raised their glasses, and whispered in admiration. It was a beautiful story, a perfect picture of a successful son grateful to his elderly mother. But my ears started ringing, and I couldn't hear anything anymore. An apartment in Montmartre? 10,000 euros a month? I stood there, stunned. All I could think of was the leaking bucket in my attic in the 18th arrondissement, where I had lived for decades. The rough hands from the smell of glue and turpentine, the long, cold nights in my damp room. Meanwhile, my son was bathed in bright lights, surrounded by wine and praise. I turned to look at Isabelle. She wasn't applauding. She just raised her glass, her eyes meeting mine with a cold, smug look. She knew. She knew it was all a lie woven in front of everyone. And she knew that in this moment, with hundreds of admiring eyes on me, I would never have the strength to expose my son. I don't remember how I left the party. I just remember walking back to my attic alone, with the sound of applause and praise echoing in my head, now sounding like mocking laughter. When I opened the door, the contrast made my chest ache. There was no balcony overlooking Sacré-Cœur, only a tiny window facing the mottled brick wall of the building across the street. There was no €10,000 monthly allowance, only a red electricity bill lying alone on my rickety wooden table. My dinner was just a piece of dry bread left over from yesterday. I sat down on my creaky bed, and tears streamed down my face. But this time, it wasn't because of hunger or loneliness. I was crying because of a more brutal truth. My son had turned my entire life of sacrifice into a cheap performance. In his eyes, I was no longer a mother. I was just a shiny prop on his stage. I looked around my cramped attic, where old drawings were covered in dust and mold, where for so many years I had told myself that my sacrifice was worth it. And then, a burst of anger flared up, hot and consuming my pain. I knew I couldn't sit still anymore. His show had reached its grand finale in front of hundreds of people. Now, it was my turn, and I would write my own ending. The anger gave me a strange clarity. The next morning, I wasn't crying anymore. I started taking action. My first step was to find proof, starting with the simplest thing, my own bank account. I went to the bank and asked for a detailed statement. Just as I suspected, there was no transfer of €10,000. There were only the meager, irregular incomes from the antique shop. The lie was confirmed. I should have picked up the phone and called him immediately. I should have screamed at him, "Why did you lie like that? Why did you turn me into a joke?" But I didn't. Because I knew the answer I would get. He would say it was a bank error. He would promise to check again. He would continue to lie, with that same sweet fake voice. And I would soften again. This time would be different. I wouldn't give him another chance to lie. Instead, a bigger, more terrifying question arose in my mind. Why did he have to lie so publicly and spectacularly? If he just wanted to improve his image, he could have said some empty words of thanks. Why did he have to invent a specific amount and a specific address? What was he trying to hide? Who was he actually giving that €10,000 to? I knew the answer wasn't in my attic. It was in their mansion. I needed a reason to go there. A reason that wouldn't arouse suspicion. And I came up with one. I called Adrian. "Adrian, it's me," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "I have a surprise for you. Do you remember that old oil painting of a pirate ship you loved as a child? I just finished restoring it. I want to bring it to you myself." There was a moment of silence on the other end. He was probably a little surprised. "Oh, really, Mom? I remember. Then come over this afternoon." The trap was set. I wasn't going there to deliver a keepsake. I was going there to find the truth. That afternoon, I carefully wrapped the painting and took the subway to their luxurious neighborhood. Adrian opened the door, looking a bit awkward. "Come in, Mom," he said. "Isabel isn't home. She went to meet a client." I handed him the painting. He unwrapped it, and for a moment, I saw a genuine spark in his eyes, a glimmer of a childhood memory. "It's beautiful, Mom. Thank you." Just then, his phone rang. "Make yourself at home, Mom," he said. "I have to take this call. It's for work." He hurried into the living room, his voice becoming formal and distant. This was my chance. While he was busy, I didn't go to the living room. I snuck into his office, the door ajar. I knew I didn't have much time, and my heart was pounding. I wasn't looking for a checkbook or bank statements. I knew his world was now contained in his laptop. The laptop was open, and on the screen was a file of electronic payments. I quickly took out my phone and took pictures of the screen, line by line. Bills, investments. And then I saw it. A recurring money transfer. Exactly €10,000 every month. But the recipient wasn't me, and it wasn't Isabel. The recipient was a completely unfamiliar name. Céline Dubois. Address: an apartment in the city of Lyon. I stood there, staring at the name. Céline Dubois. My heart was pounding. At first, I had thought that maybe Isabel had been embezzling the money, but no. This was another secret, an even bigger one. A secret they were both hiding together. €10,000 a month, regularly, for a strange woman in Lyon. Who was she? After leaving Adrian's mansion, I didn't go straight home. I went directly to the small apartment of my dearest old friend, Genevieve. She used to be a master librarian, a person with an unparalleled ability to find information. I showed her the photo I had taken. "Genevieve, I need your help," I said. "Find out who this woman named Céline Dubois is." We sat together in front of her old computer. Genevieve started searching. There wasn't much information, but then she found a social media page. The profile was set to private, but there was a public profile picture. "Here it is, Alara," Genevieve said, pointing at the screen. The photo showed a beautiful young woman, Céline Dubois. She was smiling, and in her arms was a boy of about 5 years old. And then I looked at the boy, his eyes, his bright blue eyes, and his smile. That smile, the way the corners of his mouth turned up, was exactly like Adrian's when he was a child. My heart seemed to stop. All the air in my lungs seemed to be sucked out. Genevieve looked at me, her face full of worry. "Alara, are you okay?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the child's face. A child with my son's eyes. A child I never knew existed. And then everything became clear. The 10,000 euro lie wasn't meant to deceive me. It wasn't to polish his image. It was a cover. A perfect cover to hide an even bigger secret. Adrian didn't just have one life, he had two. And he was using money and my sacrifices to support his ex-lover and his illegitimate child. I had a grandson, and my son had hidden him from me for 5 years. After the shock, I didn't call a lawyer. This wasn't something that could be solved by law. This was a matter of the heart. The next morning, I took the first train to Lyon. I went to the address on the file. It was a luxurious apartment complex, located next to a beautiful park. I didn't ring the doorbell. I just sat on a bench across the street and waited. I waited for a long time. And then I saw him. Adrian, my son. He walked out of the building, not in his usual business suit, but in a simple sweater. Walking beside him, holding his hand tightly, was the boy with the bright blue eyes. They walked into the park. Adrian bought the boy ice cream and pushed him on the swing. He played with him on the grass. I sat there, from a distance, watching. I saw a completely different Adrian, a gentle and patient father. As I watched the scene, the anger within me vanished, leaving only a deep sadness. Sadness for a family that could have existed but was buried by lies. Finally, I stood up and walked toward them. Adrian was smiling, but when he looked up and saw me, his smile disappeared. His face turned paper white. He stood motionless, unable to say a word. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked slowly, knelt down to be at eye level with the child who was looking at me in confusion. I looked into his bright blue eyes, my son's eyes, and asked one single question. "What's his name, Adrian?" My question seemed to break through all of Adrian's defenses. He collapsed onto a nearby bench, buried his face in his hands, and began to sob uncontrollably. The boy, seeing his father like this, also started to cry. His name is Leo," Adrian whispered through his hands, his voice broken. That evening, at a small cafe, Adrian told me everything, through tears of regret. Céline was his first love from college, before he even met Isabelle. They had been deeply in love. But then he met Isabelle, the daughter of a prestigious family, a ticket to the world of high society he had always longed for. He chose status over love and broke up with Céline. But he didn't know that at the time, Céline was pregnant with his child. A few years later, when the baby, Leo, was older, Céline found him again. Not to cause trouble, but just so her son could know his father. "I was so scared, Mom," Adrian said, his eyes filled with tears. "I knew Isabelle's family would never accept an illegitimate child. They value their family honor more than anything. An heir with a stain like Leo would ruin everything I had worked so hard to build. So, to secure that prestigious marriage and maintain his position, he had to hide his past. He had provided for Céline and Leo, asking them to live a quiet life. The 10,000 euros a month was to provide them with a comfortable life and to buy their silence. And the lie at the gala. I didn't know what else to do, Mom, he confessed. Isabel started to get suspicious about the large expense. I had to invent a story. And lying about providing for you was the most logical, most touching story. I. I selfishly thought that you would never expose me, that you would forever remain silent out of love for me. He looked up at me, his eyes red. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm truly sorry. I sat there, listening to my son's confession. A story of weakness, selfishness, and wrong choices. Our conversation was interrupted by the most unexpected person, Isabel. She stood at the cafe entrance, in her expensive business attire, her hair neatly tied in a bun. She had surely hired a private investigator to follow Adrian. Her eyes weren't on me or Adrian. Her gaze was fixed on Celine and Leo, who were sitting at another table nearby with a terrifying coldness. When she came to our table, her reaction was not the jealousy of a betrayed wife. There were no tears, no screaming, only the ruthless coldness of a businesswoman seeing the biggest investment of her life being threatened. Adrian, she said, her voice flat and emotionless. Do you know what you've done? You're gambling with the honor of the Beaumont family. She turned to me. And you, she said, what do you think you're doing? Trying to be a hero? Before I could answer, she walked straight to Celine's table. Miss Dubois, she said imperiously, I think you know the deal. If this secret gets out, she paused, looking down at the little boy Leo. I will use all my family's power to make sure you lose custody of your son. I'll make sure you can never find another job in France again. Then she turned back to Adrian. And you, my dear, you will be ruined. My family will withdraw all their capital from your company. You will be left with nothing. I was stunned. This wasn't a jealous wife. This was a cold-blooded monster. The real danger wasn't Adrian's lie. The real danger was the woman he had chosen to marry. Seeing the fear in Celine's eyes and the helplessness in Adrian's, I knew my objective had changed. This was no longer about getting justice for myself. This was about protecting my precious grandson from the clutches of this monster. The next day, I arranged a private meeting. Just the three of us, me, Adrian, and Isabel, in a private meeting room at a hotel. When they arrived, Isabel sat down with the confidence of someone holding all the cards. Adrian sat next to her, looking like a ghost. I didn't say much. I simply placed the evidence I had on the table. My bank statement, showing that not a single euro had been transferred to me. The screenshot of Adrian's computer, showing the 10,000 euro transfer to Celine. And finally, an audio recording. What's this? Isabel asked, frowning. It's a recording of my son's speech at the gala at the Rodin, I said calmly. A very touching speech. I'm sure the newspapers would love it. I didn't threaten to sue them for fraud. I knew that would only hurt Adrian more. Instead, I looked straight into Isabel's eyes. You can ruin Adrian if you want, I said in a cold voice. You can withdraw your capital. You can make him go bankrupt. That's between the two of you. I paused, then continued, enunciating each word. But if you touch a single hair on that boy Leo's head, if you try to take away Celine's custody, I promise you, the next morning, this entire file, along with the touching story of the gala lie, will be on the front page of the biggest newspaper in Paris. I leaned forward. Just imagine, the Beaumont heiress and her ridiculous charity farce. The family honor you've worked so hard to protect will become the laughingstock of all of Europe. It was a threat that Isabel understood. I wasn't using the law. I was using her own weapon, honor and image. I had turned her greatest strength into a fatal weakness. Her confident expression crumbled. For the first time, I saw fear in those cold eyes. The tables had been turned. Isabel had no other choice. She was forced to accept a tacit agreement. Their marriage continued, but it was no longer a marriage. It had become a cold contract, an arrangement to maintain appearances. Adrian still had to live under his in-laws' shadow and play the part of the perfect husband. But in return, he could secretly visit his son without being threatened. As for me, I didn't get the 10,000 euros a month. I didn't move into the lovely apartment in Montmartre. I still live in my attic, where the roof still leaks whenever it rains in Paris. I still continue my work of mending others' past to make a living. On the surface, nothing has changed, but in reality, everything has. Because every weekend, a little boy with bright blue eyes named Leo comes to my attic. Not to learn to restore old things, but to learn to paint. My cramped attic is now filled with his clear laughter. The old smell of turpentine and glue has been replaced by the smell of fresh oil paint. The sunlight streaming through the tiny window no longer looks cold. It dances on the colorful drawings we create together. I didn't get back money or fame. I got back something infinitely more valuable. A family. A real family, built on love and shared secrets. And in the silence of that attic, I won.